Hi, and welcome back. So today you will be learning 11 watercolor techniques: wash, graded wash, dry brush, wet on wet, masking, splattering, wet and dry, scraping, resist, lifting, salt, and channeling. And now with watercolor paint always should be transparent. If you have little tubes, that's great. If you have these ovals, that's perfect too. For our 11 techniques today, you're gonna need a crayon. I have white, but any lighter color will do. Some water, some nice clean water in a dish. I have two paintbrushes that I'm gonna show you today. I have a flat brush because the ferrule is flat, and a round brush where this one is nice and round. Now, and a paper towel. Make sure that you do have a paper towel. Now make sure that your brushes are nice and soft. You want natural hair bristles or all-purpose watercolor brushes because those will soak up the water. You know, I call them quiet brushes or noisy brushes. The noisy brushes are tend to kind of gouge out the paint, and those are good for acrylic paint and oil paint, things like that. But quiet brushes that have nice soft bristles, that's good for watercolor paint. Okay, so it's always good to have a paper towel handy, water, your paint, and this. So the first technique, we're gonna get our paintbrush wet, and I'm gonna use the round brush, and you can choose any color that you want. I have some paint that's sort of on the lid right here. So I'm just gonna add some water to this right here and just kind of mix up what's on the lid here. You can use the lid as a palette where you can mix colors. A wash is just a nice, even block of color, just like that. And it's nice and transparent. You can still see through it, but it's not terribly dark where you can't see anything through it. And I'm gonna kind of go back over so you can see a little bit more. Right, just a nice, even block of color, just like that. Now graded wash, I have gravity working with me here. So graded wash is gonna be where you have this gradation of value change going from dark to light. So with graded wash, I can kind of charge up my paintbrush, and I'm just using the round brush right now. Charge up when I have a lot of paint, I can even take that just like that. You can see how dark that is, right? Well, I'm just gonna add a little bit of water to my brush and dip and swipe on the side, and then pull some of that water down, and you can see it's starting to get lighter. And then I'm going to add even more water, just like that. And gravity kind of helps, and it creates this gradation. I can kind of go back over to smooth it out, kind of blend those values together, just like that. We don't want to go over our paper too many times because that will scrub the paper and it'll kind of pick up some of that watercolor paper, and we don't want that. Dry brush is a technique exactly how it sounds, where I'm going to wet my brush, dip it into the paint, but then I'm going to dab off some of that water near the ferrule so it kind of dries off the bristles a little bit. And you can see some of the paint kind of getting on, but there's still paint on my brush. And that creates wispy marks just like this. And that would be good for grass or fur or hair, anything that grows, or to create texture like bark on a tree. Now, if I get this paint wet, it creates a very different feel, right? It's nice and smooth. But this technique that we're learning is dry brush. Now, at any point during this video, you can stop and start and rewind. If I was speaking too quickly and you want to go back, that's the beauty of the videos. Just go back and rewatch. This fourth technique that we're going to learn is wet on wet. So I'm going to take nice clean water and wet the paper first. nice and wet. And then picking up any other colors that I want, adding some, maybe some orange, and you can see that dripping, that's pretty cool. Some blue. And you can see how that sort of blends together. And wet on wet, I don't want this to drip too much. So I'll just kind of soak up a little bit of that water. Most likely with our assignments, we're going to be working a little more flat. But for the sake of the video, it's upright. But you can see how it blended. It sort of looks like tie-dye. It's very cool. Maybe take a little purple, see what happens there. And over time it spreads and bleeds and it makes really cool. So that is wet on wet. Now masking. Masking is just what it sounds like. We're using some masking tape. You're putting something down to block the paint. And it's just some masking tape that I put down in a little X. And then when you put paint over it, wherever the masking tape is, the paint doesn't go. So if you want to leave an area of your painting nice and white, or if you painted it a certain color and you want it to stay that color, but you still want other things on top of it, you can use the masking technique where you put some masking tape down on dry paper. So make sure that it is nice and dry. And then when that's dry, we'll come back to that and you peel it off and you can see how nice. Now splattering. Splattering is pretty fun. It's exactly how it sounds. We are going to take one side. I'm going to just add a little bit of water so you can see what happens. It's going to be similar to wet on wet. And then I'll mix like a blue violet. So I'm taking a little bit of blue on my lid and a little bit of the violet, mixing it together. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take my other paintbrush and I'm going to hit it against. It's getting on other places, but that's okay because it's kind of fun. And you can see the dry splattering leaves nice sharp dots, whereas the wet splattering sort of has that wet on wet feel where it's sort of dripping, right? So that's pretty cool. Scraping is the next technique that we're going to talk about. I'm just going to add some paint down here on the paper. I'll add a little bit of that violet also. And I add it in. Now scraping, you are making an abrasion on the surface of the paper. So when that's dry, I don't know if you can see that, get a little bit closer. But when this dries, you'll be able to see, I used the back end of the paintbrush and I just scraped some shapes in, and you can see when it starts to dry, it's even kind of pooling into the abrasions that I made on the paper just now. So pretty cool for like bark technique, or if you need to write anything inside, it's a really awesome technique to show texture. Now resist, this is where our crayon comes in. I'm gonna take my crayon, and I'm gonna write something. Now, what are crayons made out of? Wax, right? Wax and water don't mix. So I'm gonna take some paint and put this over the top. Now, the wax will kind of push off that paint. It's like, hey, get away. And it shows up what I have written in the white. And you can see it's resisting. And it says art class. Pretty cool. And that is called resist, or wax resist. All right. The next one is lifting, and this is where your paper towel is going to come in handy. So you have the lifting technique. If you put too much paint down, you're like, ooh, that's way too dark. I can't see through that because watercolor is supposed to be transparent. Well, I can take my paper towel, and while the paint is wet, I lay that down and actually lift off some of that paint. And this could be good for textures, just like how I was doing over here, to kind of dab up some of that extra paint. Pretty cool. Salt technique, that's exactly what it sounds like. Now, you just have some regular table salt. And we'll see if I can do this. Maybe I'll lay this a little bit like this. Now, super important to do this salt technique while the paint is still wet. We have just your run-of-the-mill salt. I'm going to take some of this salt and sprinkle it on while it's wet. Let me turn this up right. Now, once that salt is there, we want to leave it alone. You don't want to go back over it with your paintbrush, because then you'll get the little salt crystals inside your bristles, and you don't want that. So that's the last thing. And what does salt do to water? It sucks all the water in, right? And salt is made of like the little crystals. So when this is dry, you'll see a really amazing texture that looks like little crystals all over. The water goes and sucks in all the water, and it's a really cool technique. Now for this last technique, this is called channeling. You want to make sure that you have nice, clean water. So I have a separate dish right here for my nice, clean water. And I'm going to angle this down because it has to stay flat. Let's see if we can see this here. Okay, so for channeling, you want to get a round brush. And I'm dipping the water. Let's move this over here. See the water hanging off the end of my paintbrush? I'm going to draw with that water. And I'm going to try not to touch the paper. I'm just using the paintbrush to drag this along. Hope you can see that, dragging this water. Now, when we add, we're creating a channel, right? Like a stream, a creek of water. And now I'm going to add some paint. Now, some paint, I call it zooming. Like some paint zooms more than others. And let's see what happens. I touch it just to the water. And it zooms on through. Can you see that traveling? Pretty cool. And you can take other colors and add it to it. And it will zoom only through where those colors, where the channel is. We can add a little bit of red and see what happens. And then we want to leave that alone to dry so that the channel doesn't burst. So we're going to leave this flat to dry, and it starts to look like tie-dye, and it's pretty cool. So those are the 11 techniques: wash, braided wash, dry brush, wet on wet, masking, splattering, wet and dry, scraping, resist, lifting, salt, and then everyone's favorite, channeling.